the Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Paterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
So I'm Barry, Laura's son, and I think probably most of you have some familiarity with my mother. She was very interesting in a way that, on the one hand, as a mother, she was incredibly supportive and concerned and not at all extroverted, but as a poet, which is where I learned about her real life. She was unbelievably expressive and open about who she was, and she really, for the last 40 years of her life, just dedicated herself to poetry, the poetry community, particularly I think in northern New Jersey. She did a tremendous amount of work with Maria, and with many of the people who now serve on the board of the foundation. She died on April 9th, 2021, so we just celebrated or honored the 4th year of her passing. And it doesn't seem like really it's been that long, and I think one of the reasons that it has gone so quickly is that we think about her, reminded of her often because of this foundation. And it was something when she was in hospice, I originally proposed to her the notion that we would establish this foundation. And she said, oh, no, it's too much trouble. But then the next day, I came back and she said, you know, I was thinking about that foundation and I think that would be really nice. So this was what we did to continue her legacy and her interest in supporting people in the community, and in particular, her form of poetry, which I've learned was called narrative poetry. I don't know if that's an official title or not, but that's what we focus on. The foundation really has 2 prongs. One is the award, which we give annually, and which we're very excited to honor Suzanne Cleary in her book, The Odds, this year, and all the finalists. We have here Colleen Busch and Susan Rothbard, but also Emily Hyland, who is a 2-time finalist, Daniel Donaghy, and Subhaga Crystal Bacon were the other finalists. And the work, I understand it, I'm not exactly somebody who probably would be in a position to judge the poetry, but I think they all seem to be incredibly high quality, really meaningful poets in the narrative style. The other thing that the foundation does is publishes Lips magazine, which my mother was extremely proud of. I think that she proclaimed it to be like the longest running independent poetry magazine. I don't know if that's true or not. She did have a tendency to exaggerate, but it might be true. And we're really thankful for Jim Gwynn, who's here today, who now has taken over the reins of publishing. And we just had a new issue that came out that's available for purchase here. I'll remind everybody at the close about the reading we have for that issue, which will be coming up at the end of May. I want to thank the members of the board of directors of the foundation. They all do this on a voluntary basis, and we could not do it without them. Led, of course, by Maria, my mother's long-term friend and co-conspirator in all things poetry. Michelle Lerner, who met my mother when she was in high school, worked for her as an intern, and they became close friends. And she has been amazing at, working on the foundation and running the emails. So if you email and get a response, it's going to be from Michelle. Ken Ronkowitz, who's a longtime poet friend, who handles all of our social media. We definitely couldn't do it without him. Jim Gwynn, who I mentioned, who edits Lips. We were very fortunate to have 3 new members join the board of directors this year. two of whom are here today. Lisa Nicolau, who's also a former finalist for the award. Savia Barrett, also I believe a former finalist for the award, who's here. Jennifer Poteet, also a former finalist, who was sick and not able to make it. But we really, I personally cannot tell you how appreciative I am of their work on a voluntary basis, making the thing run. They review all of the submission to LIPS and the initial screening for the award submissions. I also want to thank New York Quarterly, Raymond Hammond, who I think in honor of my mother agreed to publish the winning manuscript and has done so without charge to the foundation every year, and work with our winner to make sure that it meets with her or his approval before it comes out, and we're just really grateful that New York Quarterly has continued to do that for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maria to introduce our winner, Suzanne Cleary, and for her to read from the odds. So thank you very much for coming.
I'm Maria Gillen, and I'm very pleased to welcome you here to the Poetry Center for this program that honors Laura, who was such a good friend for so many years, and with whom we traveled all over the world reading our poems and having a wonderful time, actually. Good to have memories like that to look back on, I have to say. And I heard Laura's voice on the video, and I just could see her. She would be so thrilled to see you all here today to honor her and honor this prize. I want to introduce the winner, Suzanne Cleary, whose book is called The Odds, and it's about chance, crazy luck, bad luck, about the luck of the draw and what we make of that. Through arresting imagery and surprising turns, these narrative and contemplative poems examine the work of holding a job, of making art, of making sense of our historical moment. There is mortality and there is humor. There are references from Angie Dickinson to Edward Elgar. Cleary is a poet for whom everything feels something, sometimes against the odds, connected. Her previous collections are Beauty Mark, Crude Angel. She's the recipient of a Pushcart Prize, the Cecil Hemley Memorial Award of the Poetry Society of America, and fellowships from the New Jersey Foundation for the Arts, McDowell and Yanders. Her poems appear in anthologies, including Best American Poetry, and in journals, The Atlantic, Poetry London. She is core faculty in the MFA Creative Writing Program of Converse University. Sorry, I'm having allergy problems. The 2024 judge was Jan Beatty, and she read for us a number of times and gave workshops. And she's a professor emerita also from Pittsburgh, from Carlow University MFA program. Anyway, she said, and she's a very risk-taking poet herself, she said about Suzanne's book, the odds speak of the terrible moments of unknowing in all of us. In sure-footed lines, these poems cover great distance from the foibles we all experience to our dreams of bigger worlds. This moving collection creates breadth and room to travel between worlds as we speak to the dead as well as the living. I think that's a wonderful comment to make about Suzanne's book, and let's welcome Suzanne today.
at the feet of Michelangelo's David. They are not the first couple to stand at the feet of David and kiss as if they are saying goodbye at a train station, with one suitcase set between them and the conductor leaning out his window, bringing the whistle to his mouth, but not yet blowing it, pressing the cool metal to his lower lip as he watches travelers rush past the couple as water rushes around a stone in a river. Oh, like attention itself, a tumbling, ungovernable thing for all but the geniuses among us, who somehow can concentrate on something the tour guide is saying about Michelangelo's study of cadavers. She wants us to look at David's right hand, which hangs by his side, slightly oversized, its bulging veins proving that this is the hand of a living man, pulsing with blood. It is warm and pliant as the hands of this couple who stand at the feet of the masterpiece, who are not the first couple to kiss here, but are the last for today, for the Academia closes in 10 minutes. People press past to buy postcards, posters, tote bags, to reclaim their umbrellas, for today in Florence it is pouring wide angel wings of rain, which drips onto the tile floor from the hair of the couple, from the hems of their coats. They have come here to get out of the rain. They kiss at the feet of David because he stands in the gallery off the lobby. And why should they wait? What better way to make use of their time, so close to marble made flesh, to the vast head tilted downward, watching? Well, that poem is set in... That poem is set in Florence, Italy. But Florence, Italy has nothing on Paterson, New Jersey. Not today. I am just thrilled and honored to be reading here today. And I thank Maria Gillen for her introduction and all she has done for everyone in the poetry community over the years. I also thank everyone who is connected to the Laura Boss Poetry Foundation for the good work that they do, keeping Laura's yay poetry spirit going so strong as we move into the future. I also thank Jan Beatty, who judged this competition and chose my manuscript, The Odds. And I thank the other finalists who are wonderful poets for traveling to be here today. One of you traveling really far. I thank each of you for being here with us all today. Most of the poems that I'm going to read are from my book, The Odds, and this next poem is the very first poem in the book. And how do I sound? Am I okay? Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, this poem is called Emergency Room. When it's your heart, you go to the front of the line, ahead of the humpbacked woman holding a rosary, and the construction worker holding his side, and the woman with long brown hair holding a baby. You go ahead of the boy with his arm in a towel, and his father holding a cell phone and not looking up. You walk 2 steps, and then you feel a wheelchair at the back of your knees, and you sit. I sat. The fluorescent light seemed to shimmer like a bead curtain, and I'm not saying I saw my life flash before me, but next I was seeing that day in Rome when I stood inside the front door of my hotel, watching rain, sudden and hard, fall, and that old man appeared with a blue plastic bucket full of umbrellas. How happy I was, I remembered, to have my choice of colors, red, blue, black, yellow. I chose a red one, Then I put it back. I wanted the yellow. Everyone on our tour was choosing, and my husband helping me open the cheap, overpriced umbrella as rain beaded on my glasses, and it became clear that we would let nothing stop us. Not that day. Thank you. Please feel comfortable not clapping after every poem, unless you need to, but I don't know that you need to. This next poem, as with many of my poems, was written after I heard something. I often hear something or see something, and I decide, oh, maybe that's a poem. And this is a poem about an expression, a word I always heard in my childhood. And this was, my childhood was in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York. Cahoots. I figured it was somewhere up near Albany, maybe a suburb where the governor lived, but what did I know? I was a kid, I didn't drive, and how far can you pedal on a banana-style seat with playing cards clothespin to the back wheel? Every week, someone else was in cahoots, had traveled to that famous town. I wondered, what was the draw of cahoots for the mechanics who charged my father twice for the windshield wipers on our lime-kissed green station wagon? What was the draw for the freckled twins who smashed our pumpkin? For the blue-haired sisters who cheated at church bingo? This much I knew. In cahoots, people played bingo, although I could not say if there were churches up there. And I knew this: no one was ever alone. There were always at least two in cahoots. No one who had seen it ever spoke of it. The stories of cahoots left for others to tell, my grandfather especially, who knew of more people in cahoots than did anyone for miles. He named names, he named neighborhoods where, for example, no one would speak Slovak to him, where Slovaks would not speak their own language. They're all in cahoots, he would tell me, in a tone that suggested overcrowding, a place I would not want to live or even to visit. Better to stay in my hometown with my mother and father in our modest but pleasant split level. Never fond of travel, each July we inexplicably packed the wagon for our week at the Jersey Shore. One year, a horseshoe crab like a crusty hubcap laced with green slime washed onto the sand. My father and two boys slipped driftwood under the crab, nudged it onto the lip of rising tide, which lifted it, carried it beyond sight. Already I knew that somehow the waves and the moon were in cahoots. I knew that each day was shorter than the day before. If that summer I suspected that cahoots was not a place, I was wrong. Too young to know that we all end up in cahoots, whether a penthouse downtown or a ranch in Cahoots County. I was still so young that I'd have sworn, cross my heart, I would never be in cahoots. Not ever. Not me. Well, I have spent a lot of time in cahoots with other poets over my lifetime. And, that includes today. I know that there are a lot of poets who are in the audience today. And this poem that I'm going to read is called Literary Discussion. And I will tell you that it is based on fact. But then, of course, I embroidered certain facts because it's a poem. And I promise you that I will not tell you ever which parts are real and which parts are not. Literary discussion. We are standing in the conference room discussing Emily Dickinson's Scientific Eye when at some point I say Angie, as in Angie Dickinson, and I stop dead. Blanche, fake cough, start to back away when I notice no one seems to have heard me say Angie. They probably are too young to remember her. She, of the lacquered white blonde page boy that never moved from the early 60s until maybe today, for I think she is still alive. And so I let my slip slide, sure as Angie performing a soft shoe beside Frank Sinatra. Both of them wearing tuxedos, but Angie wearing only the top half. Her long legs bare, except for glossy nylon stockings. Angie of the turquoise eyeshadow. Her eyes, whatever she trained them on, full of adoration, as a poet's eyes must be, I believe. I could probably relate this to Emily, whose love for the world was thwarted by the world, yet never dimmed. Witness the scrapbooks she assembled of wildflowers and grasses accompanied by Latin names in her tiny script. As the discussion continues, I cannot help but hear Angie's soft purr of a voice and my father's newspaper crinkling in his lap when he heard Angie and looked up at the TV, at the only woman he'd ever found beautiful except for my mother. The show was Policewoman, which aired from 1974 to 1978, approximately the worst years of my life. Angie was Pepper Anderson, an undercover cop in LA. With a bit of sleuthing, I discover that as of 2023, Policewoman is the oldest live-action television series with all of its main actors still living, including nonagenarian Dickinson and Earl Holliman. Wasn't Holliman involved in Watergate? No, that was Halderman, and a different world from the one in which we now live. Or maybe it's the same world, but with different actors. My father's been dead nearly 15 years, my mother 2 months later. I read on Wikipedia that by the last season of Policewoman, Dickinson tired of appearing in scenes where the phone rings while I'm taking a bath. Don't we all? I mean, is there any one of us who is not awash with the time in which we live, in which we have lived? Did you know that Emily Dickinson loved to bake? I offer. She was famous for her bread and cakes. What feeds us, I wonder? I mean, why do we stand together and talk poetry as if we understand where it comes from, as if it isn't nearly always a surprise and almost embarrassing how much we love it? Some of my poems happen after I read something that I find interesting. And usually my first impulse is that I just want to write down what I read so I'll remember it. But then sometimes I'll write a little more to complete the picture. And sometimes, if I'm lucky, this can turn into a poem. That's what happened with this next poem, which originated with a footnote in a book about the English artist John Constable. Now, I have no idea why this information was in a footnote, but it was one of my favorite parts of the book, and the poem is called Who Among Us? What the bulldog lacks in grace, it makes up for with lack of grace. Thick-set, low-slung little pig feet shuffling through wet leaves beside the river as two men follow at some distance. Brothers, one talking and one nodding, all three of them swathed in the fog of early morning after a night of rain, the last drops still falling from the few leaves remaining. November is a hard month, swelling with darkness and chill, but October also was hard, despite purple coneflowers and goldenrod fizzing with bees. The one man slowly shakes his head, and the other man nods, as if they are in a library or streetcar or anywhere, while the dog noses the fragrant ground, waddles on, his one gnarled expression expressing nothing, even as his hind leg slips, and of course the other one follows. And then the dog is spinning on its stomach down the steep bank into the River Wye. Who among us has not fallen into the River Wye, or into its happier tributary, the Why Not? Who among us has not tensed at the first signs of the trajectory before giving in? Dan, this is the dog's name, Dan labors to breathe as he burbles in the shallows and then, as the record states, regains the shore, all of which can be heard in Edward Elgar's Enigma Variations, Opus 36, the opening bars of Variation 2. Good boy, Dan. Good boy. Okay. I almost read to you some notes that were left here on the lectern. Okay, but this is my next poem. I don't know how I would have recovered from that. Okay, or you, perhaps. Okay, I'm now reading a poem that is it's a rather new poem. And I'm reading it because every time I give a reading, I like to read at least one new poem. This poem is about an experience that I think many of us may be having these days. It's called Doom Scrolling at Bedtime. When I think I've read the worst of it, shootings, heat wave, wildfire, the latest diet craze, I see the headline, man stopped at customs with 100 live snakes in his pants. And I understand I have just bought a ticket to Nightmare City. Each time the bedsheet touches my leg, I will shiver as if it's the winter night in my late father-in-law's story. The time Junior Quail parked his car at the top of a hill in a snowstorm and forgot to set the brake. By dawn, the green Ford had shifted and slid, swerved into a snowbank across the state line, so insurance wouldn't pay for the tow. My late father-in-law and Junior rocked and pushed, unable to budge that car until thaw. This was in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, state with the best city names: Crooksville, Defiance, Reminderville. The towns of my upstate New York childhood lead back to the classic: Troy, Syracuse, Ithaca, Rome. Cities I didn't know existed beyond our shoe factories and dairy farms. I knew so little of the world, and now I know little enough that I think I can choose my fears, that I can name each danger. I scroll posts. A repost. Has anyone tried to unplug the world and plug it in again? I wonder, how long will I lie awake wondering if the Snake Man was headed home? And where does he live? Or was he traveling? For adventure? For business? What is more frightening than the mind? When you really think about it, what is more frightening than the mind? I am going to read 2 more poems, and this next poem also happens to be a new poem, and okay, I've skipped over that poem. And this poem is also a new poem. I'll be reading this poem and the poem after it, and I don't think this needs an introduction. I hope it doesn't, because I'm not giving it one. It's called If You Cannot Be Kind. I used to wear glasses that turned dark in sunlight and never turned all the way back. So I looked like Roy Orbison, but shorter. And on a day he'd left at home his guitar, which he didn't need to write a new song. In his head, he could see the song, could hear it as if he were touching each string, each downstroke and upstroke, each space between. Roy Orbison, who I would not hear of until years later, and for years after that, I would think he was blind. But the story of Orbison's dark glasses is this. One day, he entered a TV studio and walked straight to the mic. Forgetting he still wore his sunglasses, forgetting everything but song, he began, and no one stopped him. No one stepped forward and held out a hand, saying, "Here, Roy, I'll take those." Not one of the studio crew in short-sleeve white dress shirts and narrow black ties did other than cross their arms, lean back on their heels, and listen. Not one, yet thinking of the story he would tell that night over supper, the refrain he might sing for his wife. Not one would think of his own close brush with fame. Oh, it is a rare and unsung talent to recognize greatness in others and then lose oneself in it. As happened that day, Roy Orbison found his trademark accidentally, like the discovery of penicillin and the Post-it note. Roy's pitch-black lenses coincidentally shielding his eyes from the harsh spotlight. The struggle to see in strong light is ancient. Nero stared through a thin pane of smoky quartz to see gladiators bleed under the Roman sun, which was, and by the way is, the same sun from which you shade your eyes with hand or glasses. My early generation photochromic lenses suffered photochromic fatigue, which is the gradual degradation of the ability to both darken and clear. To darken and clear may be what creates a song, a life. I wore them yesterday, it seems, then cast them off for clip-on flip-up sunglasses popular in the 80s that now look ridiculous. Recently, I heard this, and it stopped me. If you cannot be kind to yourself, imagine yourself in a photo from childhood. Then imagine being mean to that child. It should be impossible. It should make your eyes water. I'm ending with one of the poems that I think is central to the odds. It's a poem that's special to me because I wrote it for and dedicated it to a poet named Russell Jackson, a wonderful young poet who studied with me, was an MFA student of mine. And the poem is quite straightforward about what I was writing to him in the early days of the COVID pandemic. And the title says it all. I don't need to give any more introduction. The title of this poem for Russell Jackson is, "For the Poet Who Writes to Me While Standing in Line at CVS, Waiting for His Mother's Prescription." It's nothing that you flat out say, Russell, but your email reminds me that 6 months into pandemic, 5 months into quarantine, CVS remains open 24 hours, its harsh blue-white light steady as nothing in nature is steady. Those long fluorescent bulbs still dive-bombing lumens so that midnight is bright as 8 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 2 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. You can see that I struggle to carry one thought to the next these long days. I spend hours on the internet becoming expert on the height of actors from Hollywood's golden age, on the 25 cutest photos of 4-year-old Princess Charlotte. I now know that Elizabeth Bishop was a bit taller than I am, a bit heavier. Her clothes would be too big for me, as no doubt her shoes. Russell, what is it that supposedly concentrates the mind wonderfully? Samuel Johnson wrote it in Boswell's biography, which I have never read and never will. I know my limits. Lately, I think that I know little else worth knowing. My only advice for your poems, Russell: wash your hands for as long as it takes to sing Happy Birthday. Did you know that song is no longer copyrighted? 5 years ago, U.S. District Court Judge George H. King ruled Happy Birthday is public domain. The 1935 patent applied only to the melody and specific arrangements of the tune, but not to the actual song itself. When Judge King writes actual song, he means lyrics, but I hear him saying song is something beyond the reach of law, beyond reach of language. Song is like a kernel of light inside of things, steady. Russell, be like CVS. I don't know what this means, be like CVS. Russell, dare to say what doesn't make sense, then wait patiently to see the sense inside of it. Be like CVS. Be like the bewildering variety of toothpastes, decongestants, hair conditioners. Be like orange Velcro knee braces, like spools of pastel ribbon that hums, pulled across a scissor. Be like the aisle of bare shelves where the cleaning products stood, where the white metal shelves now display only how each shelf, with a simple, ingenious hook, fits into the frame. I'm telling you nothing that you don't already know, Russell. Be like whatever accepts the horrid light and shines in it. Be like the 8-ounce can of lightly salted cashews for which you are newly willing to pay $12.99 as you stand in line waiting for the blue-gloved hands to hold out to you the small white bag, which is not for you, except in that you are the one who will carry it where it must go.
next reader is one of our finalists, Colleen Morton Busch. Her finalist manuscript is called Smolder. Colleen has an MFA in poetry from Pennsylvania State University. Her poems have appeared in Willow Springs, New Orleans Review, Sycamore Review, Poet Lore, and other magazines. She's the author of the nonfiction book, Fire Monks, Zen Mind Meets Wildfire, published by Penguin Press and selected as a best book of the year by Publishers Weekly, the San Francisco Chronicle, and Barnes & Noble. She is an alumna of the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, the Community of Writers, and Tin House Writers Workshop. Her prose is published in Orion, Wild Hope, The Washington Post, and Yoga Journal, where she was a senior editor. She has worked as a college instructor in New Orleans and Beijing. She comes out to us today all the way from San Francisco Bay Area. That's a long trip to Paterson, where she lives with her husband, 2 cats, and a vivacious mini Australian Shepherd. Colleen is a student of yoga and Zen practitioner. She has hiked across the Grand Canyon twice, skied the Vallée Blanche in France, and cycled to the top of the Col du Tourmalet. My wife will correct me if I'm wrong on the French, in the French Pyrenees. But she is just as happy being behind a good book. Here's Colleen.
Thank you, Ken. How's the sound? Good. It's true, I came from Berkeley, where I live, a couple days ago, and I'm really delighted to be here today and have a chance to share some work with you. So I'll just say a bit, mostly in the beginning, and then not so much with each poem. But Smolder, just to explain a little bit where this title comes from, is a long time ago now, a couple decades ago, my husband received a diagnosis of smoldering multiple myeloma. It's a treatable but incurable blood cancer. And at the time, the prescribed treatment was watch and wait, do nothing, which is a little alarming when you hear you have cancer. Sometimes the title comes before the work. So right away, that word smolder, that whole idea of smolder, settled in me, and the lushness of that word in the midst of all this dry medical but very scary terminology got my attention, and I knew I would write towards that at some point. I wrote some of those poems, and then I forgot how much that I love and need poetry for quite a long time. I wrote a nonfiction book, which Ken mentioned. I wrote other nonfiction books, which are still waiting for their publishing home. And in the last couple of years, I found my way back to how much I love this form of poetry, and in particular, the way that it can tell a story the way nothing else can, and accrue meaning in the way that really nothing else can. And thanks to the encouragement of some very close poet friends, one of whom is here, David Keplinger, who I sent a poem a day or a poem a week for a while, I now have that collection called Smolder. And the poems, I would say, engage with the many kinds of fire that humans ignite, play with, get burned by, and spread. They're love poems and elegies, often in the same shell. And the first one is called Dressing for Death. The rayon pants with the squiggly pattern, like chromosomes. The sheer cotton tunic. Leather sandals. Breton cap. Lipstick. This is what I wear the day we see the first hematologist. In the waiting room, I count the practical hats, hairless heads, eyes trying to decipher if I'm one of them. A friend, a Zen priest, told me how after shaving her head and taking vows, people smiled at her pityingly when she wasn't in robes. She gave her long hair to locks of love. She is fortunate. Her female forebears in the priesthood removed the distraction of their beauty by scarring their faces with hot firearms just to enter the temple. You're not sick. You smolder, your illness a not yet flared flame, and it's death's head I want to turn. If I look good enough, maybe she'll concede. I claimed you first. The next poem is called Kolinos, and the one thing to explain is Yunmen appears in this poem. He's a 9th century Tang Dynasty Chinese Zen master who appears in a lot of koans, those crazy teaching stories. In Hania, our first night in Crete in 2003, you bought a tube of Kolinos Super White. Is it good? The clerk, smile shrugged. A tin of Kolinos tooth powder from the set of MASH gleams among the treasures at the National Museum of American History. But we did not know that then, newlywed, nosing the rugged southwest shore in kayaks, tearing out Lonely Planet pages as we paddled. Back in Hania, a dermatologist treating your inflamed ring finger spied your barnacled toe and prescribed an antifungal. Tough on the kidneys, so back home, we checked. We go searching for one thing and discover another. For the clear-eyed person, there are no holes to fall into, wrote Yunmen. But we fall into holes. When? Why? How? Summers too close to petrol? Some toxin, like triclosan, in most toothpastes and soaps, even socks and yoga mats. Kolinos, Kolinos. Kolinos became our watchword on the long crossing. Life vest of why not? Or might as well, right? Or whatever you want, my love. I'm going to read this next one for my sister, Kathy, who's here today, who drove me over from Brooklyn this morning. This may be the longest incubated poem in this collection. I was in the womb when the men walked on the moon for the first time in 1969. I'm giving away my age. I don't care. It's lovely to get older. And I've been trying to write about it for a very long time, and I think this poem may have finally done it. And it's called Crescent Moon, Detroit, September 2020. 1. My father's dying inside a pandemic, but not of it. I fly double-masked between triple-stacked severe weather warnings, possibility of a tornado or two. Prop my swollen, spider-bitten shin on the bulkhead. When I land in Detroit, a text, call to say goodbye, just in case. Through the interminable neon hallway to gate 16, my silent scream pulses. No, 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 no. 2. It's not that I refuse the fact of death. I know it, like my leg knows the spider's mouth, trapped between denim and flesh. I'm almost grateful for the pain, the regolith of loss and aliveness. Just a few weeks ago, he watched NASA's Apollo 13 documentary from his blue chair. This crew is coming home. What I can't abide is how close I am, yet maybe too late. 3. When Armstrong and Aldrin left boot prints on the moon, it was a crescent, like the one now waxing 238,855 miles over the tarmac while no one watches. At my birth, the moon was on the wane, a difference that matters in astrology and in grief. My mother answers. My father's breath is wet and labored. He tries to say something, but it's been days since he reached for words. Words have no gravity where he's going, where we are. How tiny the frightened spider's teeth. How vast and serene the view of home from space. Boarding begins. I hitch my carry-on over my shoulder, say only, I'm on my way. Despite what I say, I don't know if I'm willing. Your numbers are oscillating, says your sweater-vested hematologist, trending up with the occasional dip. Like during takeoff, when you feel the Earth's attempt to wrest back what's leaving before the plane levels and you're free to move about the cabin, lucky and bored. I don't like this moment. I always think something's wrong. I think I'm going to die now for a trip to Michigan or Paterson. I watch the flight attendants' faces, figuring if something's wrong, I'll see it there. But then what? Despite what I say, I don't know if I'm willing to assist others in an emergency. Right? The last time I took CPR was years ago, and what I remember best is the curious plastic kiss of the dummy. In a family of nurses, I'm the disquieted one, slippery-kneed at the bright of blood. Yet your blood is all around us, measured in M spikes, Kappa Lambda light chains, like some Venus fraternity of the order myeloma. A beautiful word, really. A flock of geese, just before they hit the engine inlet. Spray of white-winged shrapnel. I think I just have a couple more for you. How am I doing on time, Ken? Awesome. Okay. Short one. See how needle contains the word need. I'm going to miss this, I think, as I punch the needle through skin and inject what my body might use to make another body. Never knowing if it's going to hurt or I won't even feel it. More afraid of not feeling. I have one or two more depending on the time. I got time? Okay. So this next one is called To Quran Trail. It's spelled C-U-R-R-A-N. I say that only because it might sound like the Quran, but it's C-U-R-R-A-N, To Quran Trail, September 2023. And this one is for my husband, John. There's a few poems in the book that actually refer to this trail. It's in our regional park. We hike it, we mountain bike it. It's an everyday use kind of trail. And we were on that trail the day that he got his diagnosis, and we came home to the diagnosis. So it really etched itself in there, the way a song sometimes etches yourself into your memory. And we've been back there a million times since. So this poem, I think, is doing a kind of accounting. There's a lot of precision in it. There's a lot of numbers and names, but my hope is that it's in a kind of happy tension or dance with what can't be named or measured or contained. To Quran Trail, September 2023, for John. Whiter than bone block letters etched into redwood point the way. To Quran Trail. This bothers you. It is Quran, you say, not two. It's been 17 years, the sideways sum of 7 to 10, meaning the more you might live. What one expert projected beyond the usual 3 to 5, and oh, how we adored him for that math. Impossible to count how many times we've stood here catching our breath. Most are unremembered, unremarked, but 3 glint like shards of midday sun. The first, just before myeloma, was a word we'd even heard. The second, the day after death came to live in you, and Quran was the same wide trail, yet bore no resemblance to itself. Today, a fine September morning decants the scent of eucalyptus, bay leaf, wild plum, pit-studded coyote scat. I was here, but try to find me now. Like the traces in your blood measured every 3 months. We've blown past that early hopeful math. Lenalidomide, bortezomib, isatuximab, sometimes cyclophosphamide, always dexamethasone. One babe unborn, one death undied. Years of toward while also right here. One more? Is there time? So the last one I'm going to read is actually the first poem in the book. I'm not sure why I'm reading it last, but it's maybe the most lyrical of the ones, the most, of the poems that I'm reading today. It's called Spark. A struck match flung from a window into a parched field, tiptoes, whispers, catches even the ravenous air by surprise. Depends on everything for what happens next. But where does love go when a body once adored boards a train in one place and steps off it in another, utterly unadored? Does it stay on the train? Does it vanish or merely change direction? Birth and death, two refractions that for all their rowdy mystery aren't learned, but known all at once. That love persists, set like pavers between before and after, twigs in a nest of not yet, flint inside the hip of time, the most tender incongruity we carry. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be way too tall for this. I'll lean over. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. It is my absolute pleasure to be back in New Jersey. We moved last year to upstate New York in order to introduce my friend and longtime fellow member of our faithful writing group, Susan Rothbard, whose finalist manuscript is called All the Wrong Things, which is ironic because she always does all the right things. Susan is, as I am, a retired teacher of high school English and creative writing. She and I used to exchange creative writing prompts and assignment ideas for our classes when we were still teaching. We had a low-key, sort of mutually supportive competition going to see whose students could win more white writing prizes or get more of their work published. She usually won. Susan's poetry has appeared in the Cortland Review, Dogwood, Lips, the Literary Review, Nasty Women's Poets Anthology, the National Poetry Review, Paterson Literary Review, Poet Lore, and Southern Poetry Review, among many others. Her first book, Birds of New Jersey, won the 2020 Dogfish Head Poetry Prize and was published by Broadkill River Press. Her work has also been featured in Ted Kooser's American Life in Poetry and on Verse Daily. Susan also received a 2025 Individual Artist Finalist Award from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. And none of these accolades surprise me, as we have been in a small but serious writing group for years, where we give each other assignments weekly or bi-weekly and meet to share what we wrote, now on Zoom, and give each other new assignments. Susan keeps me on my toes. She never comes to a meeting empty-handed, so I always have to bring something too, no matter how rough, because I know she will have a poem she says is nothing, and it will invariably be a beautifully crafted thing. Again, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you manuscript finalist Susan Rothbard.
Susan, pull that down. Yeah, thanks.
How's that? Good? Okay. Thank you, Svea, for that wonderful introduction. and for traveling all this distance to give it. And I want to thank all of the members of the board of the foundation for selecting the manuscript when it was nascent, just the first 10 pages, and to Jan Beatty for choosing it as a finalist. Thank you, Suzanne and Colleen, for your reading. I just love listening to your poems. And I want to thank Barry in particular for honoring your mother in this so very special way. I was fortunate to work with Laura when I first started, returned to poetry after a long hiatus, and I remember going to retreats and workshops, and she was encouraging and fun and positive and a real role model for me, both in her work and in her teaching, giving me permission to say the things that I needed to say. So I thank you for honoring her. And I also have to tell you that when I first met her, I felt connected because I also have a son named Barry. And I'd never met anyone else who did, so that was the first time that happened. So it's really special to be here. I'm going to read some poems from my manuscript, All the Wrong Things, and most of the poems Svea knows because they were almost all written in our group. That's how inspirational it is. And I just had turned to her and said, I still haven't written my poem that's due on Monday, and she said, neither have I. But we won't show up empty-handed. Anyway, all of these poems were written pretty much during the pandemic between 2020 and 2023. And this first one is the poem from which the title of the manuscript comes from. And it touches a little bit on a topic that is a thread through about 7 or 8 of the poems in the manuscript, and that's serial television shows. I never watched television until the pandemic, pretty much. My retirement from teaching coincided. And so I guess I just found it intersecting with my life a little bit. So that's a thread that runs throughout. The next season. We're on season 4 now, and Jeff's decided he no longer likes the main character, who's turned out to be sleazier than we thought in seasons 1 to 3. But I say it's meant to be that way. We're meant to see his complexity and to struggle with our feelings because that's what makes for good drama. The brother whose death we celebrated seems to have had a heart after all, but we can't bring him back to apologize. And isn't that just like life, I say? Because I've been thinking about death again and wondering who'd regret the way they treated me, which I know is absurd since I won't be around to find out. But all I can say is, it's not easy being me, always looking in the rearview mirror as if I can make the car behind me slow down. Before she died, my mother said, I worried about all the wrong things, and above all else, I want to bring her back so I can tell her how wise she was, which I never did when she was alive. I thought of that yesterday when my daughter called and told me she was taking my advice about the bathroom she's renovating. Though she didn't say it that way, she said, I'm doing what you wanted. And I bristled. But then I realized she couldn't bring herself to say I was right, to simply thank me. And now I'm thinking it isn't easy for anyone to be a person. Truth is, I'm tired of being right. I'd like to be swaddled and nursed, carried and cradled. In her last days, from her hospital bed, my mother said, I want my mother. You think I'd be done writing about my parents after all these years, but I can't seem to get away from them. Sex and death. The stargazer lilies have opened completely, stigmas glistening, anthers shedding pollen onto the petals, and I think sex and don't want to look at them the same way I didn't want to see my parents naked or think of them in flagrante delicto, though I do miss their laughter when they heard a joke about sex. My father's favorite, the one about Saul, whose friend sent a stripper to his house for his 80th birthday. When he opened the door and the woman said, "How about some super sex?" he said, "I'll take the soup." That sheepish grin on my father's wrinkled face made me imagine him in love with my mother. Listen, the lilies started to die even before I cut the stems and arranged them in a vase, and already the smell is cloying, funereal. Still, if I don't get too close, they're beautiful. So among other things that happened during the pandemic was that we adopted a dog who I had said I'd never get another dog. We had lost our dog the summer before. And then about 2 weeks into the quarantine, I looked at my husband and said, we have to get a dog because we're going to throttle each other if we don't. Anyway, so this has to do with our puppy. Well, she wasn't a puppy when we got her. Separation anxiety. We put the dog in the crate, then open and close the front door so she thinks we've left. Then we tiptoe downstairs to the basement where we watch Mad Men for an hour. We're up to season 4 and everyone is still chain smoking and cheating on their spouses. We put her in the crate and set up a monitor so we can watch her wherever we are, which, right now, is the basement. Mostly she sleeps, though now and then she lifts her head and looks around. What is time? These days spread in front of us like spilled water. There are 7 seasons of Mad Men, with a total of 92 episodes. We're halfway through and can't fathom a finale. She's in the crate, so she'll be safe, this dog whose history we won't ever know, but which we invent. Someone got sick, or lost all their money and couldn't stand looking at her hungry face, or she ran away and somewhere in Oklahoma, another mother invents a story for her. We put the dog in the crate, even though we'd rather have her in our arms. We're training her to do without, though surely she already knows about loss. We put her in the crate because we're trying to do what's right, even if it feels wrong. We're getting better at pretending. When we open and close the door to signal our return, we climb the stairs slowly, as if we're in no rush. We're actors, making light of absence, our voices giving away nothing. If you were watching, you'd believe we had somewhere to go. The title of this next poem is actually the title of the painting which it refers to, which is an oil painting by Darrell Hudo, which was hanging in a friend's house. It's titled The Blue Dot. Amy says it took a long time for her to like modern art, but now she wakes to see this piece that hangs on the wall in her bedroom every day, untroubled by its ambiguity. Florida, she says, has grown on her too, and would I like to see the orchids she's attached to the trees in the backyard? Out we go through the sliding doors, humid air surprising me, as it always does in winter. And now I'm thinking about geography, how it's 80 degrees here and 10 in New Jersey, which I left this morning, marveling that both can be spinning on the same planet. Outside, the orchids seem to be of the tree, nestled as they are in sphagnum moss, not transplanted as they were by Amy's hands. When she moved here, she says, everyone brought her orchids to welcome her, and she didn't know what to do with them all. But see how they're flourishing next to the butterfly garden? The last report from the doctor was good, she tells me later as we sit by the pool, then adds that she believes even the worst things give rise to good, like how she might never have moved to Florida if she hadn't gotten sick, and look how well that had turned out. Through the glass, I see the painting, its center more purple than blue, white and black lines in fragments around it, as if someone tried to contain the blue but soon gave up and let it bleed into the surrounding colors. I don't know what it's supposed to be. At first, it looked like the end of the world, but now I see the colors shift into shapes, an ancient face, a tree, then a womb, before becoming, once again, the world. This poem has an epigraph from Barbara Kingsolver's novel, Demon Copperhead. Some of you may have read. A thing grows teeth once it's put into words. Teeth. I've been thinking about loose ends these days, which ones I might regret leaving for my kids to tie up by themselves, which will disappear into the ether, and if I can tell the difference. There are the stacks of single subject spiral notebooks stored in chronological order in plastic bins in the basement, suggestive of a desire for audience, though more than once I've almost carried them to the curb. I've spent so many years worrying about words. Just this morning, I wrote to a friend to say, I hate all the characters in The White Lotus, then backspaced and wrote, really dislike, as if to leave room for her to still love me. And isn't that all I want from words? What worries me most about my kids reading those journals is not that they'd be shocked that I cheated on their father, because even if I had, I'd never have written it down. But that picture in their minds would be better than the one I fear I've left, along with the photos they'll have. A woman with a crooked smile, hiding teeth too big for her mouth. I think I have one more. Yep. So I'm going to end with a poem about a subject that has fascinated me for a long time, and that's synchronicity, this idea of coincidence and what brings us together. Synaptic. What I love about my new garden hose is that it obediently uncoils at the turn of the spigot and then curls at my feet like a pet. Though my friend Betsy shrieked when she saw it at the side of the house, mistook its orange and black pattern for the skin of a snake. And wasn't it strange, she said, that she'd just had a dream about snakes. And that got us onto the subject of dreams, how the mind has a mind of its own. The next day, I sat on the front stoop next to the hose, talking on the phone with my sister about marriage, how women bear more of the burden, and she said, it's always been that way. Think of Adam and Eve, how she took all the blame. And there I was, in a garden again, with a snake again. I want to believe it's more than coincidence. Not that the hose is more than a hose, but that the body is more than a body. There's a synapse connecting us across time and space, like when the physical therapist presses the muscle in my back and I feel it in my leg. I want to believe we're connected to each other like that. The snake, Eve, Betsy, my sister, and if I touch the right spot, you'll feel it too.
We want to just thank everybody, particularly Suzanne. Thank you. The poems were wonderful. Colleen, thank you for traveling so far. Really enjoyed your poems. And Susan, last but not least, really wonderful poems. And I know I really enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody here really did as well. So I just want to remind people that Lips just came out. We're having a reading on May 31st at 2 o'clock at the Wayne Library. Which Wayne Library is a mystery that Ken will solve for us at some point in the future with the help of Jim. And we'll put that out on social media and on the webpage. Which one?
Valley Road.
Valley Road.
The big one.
The big one. So again, thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate your support of the foundation. If anybody is interested in contributing, we always welcome contributions. You can do it on the webpage. But regardless, we hope you'll return next year for the 2025 winter. Thank you all for coming.